I guess if it's okay with you, Maggie, I'll try to do it at the same time.
We're gonna cut out. So, if everybody could just briefly introduce themselves, say who you are and what you do here at the school and anything else that you might want to say.
Well, I'm Casey Arico. I get to co-teach with you, Maggie, the 8th grade group, and I've been on the TIES journey with you as well, which I am really excited about being here to see your presentation.
I'm Lisa Massey, and I have been a guide here at Virgin Valley Charter School for a while and worked with Maggie as long as she's been here, and am now in an administrative leadership position at the school.
I'm Tracy Canulo, and I was a founding trustee of Virgin Valley Charter School, and now I am in a leadership team role, and my title is also curriculum coordinator. I'm excited to see what Maggie has accomplished.
My name is Guy Chris, and I work with Maggie on our Galaxy team, and I in particular work with the Galaxy West students, and this is my 6th year here, and I'm really excited to learn.
So, we basically, or I have created this presentation to also follow the same guidelines that our students are required to follow at the end of the year, at the end of their 8th grade graduate year, when they do passage presentations or rite of passage presentations. So all of the components that are in the passage presentation that our students do is encapsulated within my presentation. However, the course with TIES is an integrated learning. So I have tried to mind map my presentation and weave in the pieces. And I'm using a Prezi to present, but with the Prezi you kind of get a very zoomed in look at everything. So I made a mind map of my Prezi, and there are associations. Associations are very important with mind mapping. And there are symbols, like the green vine with the blue flower is symbolizing the table of contents that we have our students do or use in their passage presentations to indicate that their presence within my presentation. And then also the blue flowers with the bright pink coming off of it is to highlight the artifacts, because artifacts are very important when the students present. We ask that they have lots of artifacts. So I'm going to begin with my introduction. Welcome to my presentation. I am very grateful for your time and for having the opportunity to work closely with each and every one of you. My gratitude flows deeply, not just as a professional, on a professional level, but on a personal level. Each of you has played a key role in my life and my children's lives, and I'm eternally indebted to you. My children are blessed to have their lives touched by such beautiful souls, as am I. You are an inspiration, and I am humbled to be presenting in front of such an amazing group of humans. When I reflect on my journey through TIES, my graduate program, I am reminded of my origins, the path leading me to Virgin Valley, and my 10 years at Virgin Valley. My time with TIES has accelerated my growth as a human and deepened my outlook of the world, as well as my perspective of my role in my little corner of this planet. I feel that I was meant to find TIES along my journey, just as I feel that I was meant to find Virgin Valley. When I came to this school, I was open to seeing the world differently and drastically altering my path. I would describe myself in my early days as an infant or seedling, just emerging into a new consciousness. I had always been drawn to the earth and the natural world, and since then, my love of earth and reverence for life has grown tremendously. Although I did not think it possible, TIES has influenced my relationships with earth and life to grow even deeper. At the beginning of my TIES journey, I was curious and excited to continue on a path that I had already been treading. I had no idea at that time how powerful my experience with ties would impact my learning and direction in life. There have been so many moments that I have felt as if my mind was swelling with new knowledge and insight. My entire view of my world has undergone a transmutation of consciousness. The people in the program, as well as the authors and literature I've been introduced, have changed my life. So now I'm going to move on to the reflection, and my reflection is woven in to this presentation. The associations that are in my mind map, so I'm definitely a linear thinker and a sequential thinker, so I've kind of abandoned that, and that's really my comfort zone. So this is very different for me to like, I mean, I also tend to be very scattered at times, so I kind of need that linear path to keep myself focused. So for me to like branch out, this has been very challenging for me. So bear with me as I present in a very non-linear way. So the title of my presentation is Relational, Emergence, and Integrated Learning. I chose this title because relationships and relational awareness has been a very big focus of mine throughout my ties journey, and so much more has emerged. I used the question of what does it mean to be human in my presentation, because this is a year-long study that I do with my students, and we go very deeply into what it means to be human. Halfway through the year, we debate this question, attempting to specify which defining characteristics of the Homo sapien sets our species apart from other species and have caused the greatest impact of humans on Earth. My collection of literature to debunk every one of these characteristics has grown tremendously since the inception of my graduate work with ties. So these are the 4 categories that the students will be broken into teams when they debate. I've attempted to the complicated and intricate task of mind mapping my work with ties in relation to big history, cosmology, relational awareness, and integrated learning. I've associated each category of defining human characteristics with one specific examples of how I've integrated lessons of hope and love into big history, so artifacts, with that being my specific goal with each of my artifacts that I'll be showing today, and the impact that ties has had on my growth and learning. And 3, the contents of our students' growth portfolio, which I'm going to show just a brief. So these are the contents of the growth portfolio that our students have. So they are within the presentation, but they're interwoven throughout. So the first category, symbolic language. So symbolic language and intelligence tends to be something that comes very much to the forefront of someone's mind when they think about how different we are from all other species. And through my ties experience, we've done an abundance of reading and writing, more than I think I've ever done in my entire life. The writing has been very challenging for me, not just the sheer amount of it, but it's been a very different type of writing that I never really knew existed, exploratory writing. And it really has caused me to have to look a lot deeper into myself in order to write in an exploratory way. And the reading, the authors that have been introduced to me through ties have been very influential in changing my view of the world. I'm going to show you the book list of some of the books. There's 3 pages there. The first column on each of the pages are the authors' names. The ones that are in the center column, those are the names of the books, and I highlighted the ones in blue that were directly related to my ties studies, my graduate work. And then the third column are books that I want to read, because the ties program has definitely awoken my desire to really keep going and keep learning. And what's in gray are books that I've already bought. I just need to read them next. And then the next slide is a fractal. And the reason why I included this is because my ties training has really caused me to see the world through new eyes. So the title of this slide here is New Eyes. Thinking in terms of fractals is different than how my mind has been trained. Language in Euclidean mathematics is linear. Stephen Howard Booner expresses that nature and the heart of the world are not linear, and describes music as replicating a fractal structure. The idea of holarchies and fractals was introduced to me through ties. It is a concept that I've been drawn to, and I have gotten into the habit of rethinking everything, seeing the world through the lens of fractals. I believe holarchy or holism, intuition, and depth is more advanced and complicated than scientific, mechanistic, linear thinking. I am intrigued by this concept and motivated to reteach myself to see the world through different eyes. And a lot of the books that I intend to read is furthering this exploration on my own. I have a slide of the debate as an artifact that I created for the Big History. It follows the same format as the Big History debates, but it is modified completely by topic to debate what does it mean to be human. So this is just an example of how I'm continually taking Big History concepts to a deeper level with the students. And then this next slide is the categories reading, writing, math, and music. With the reading lends itself, reading with the students specifically, the reading lends itself to guidance towards depth through research projects and humanitarian topics. So in choosing the things that I have the students read, this is one of the easier things to modify, as well as the writing, which also lends itself to go deeper through essay topics, such as changing minds, or determining what it means to be human, or our unit on investigative journalism. We explore topics such as consumerism and happiness and loneliness, bullying, social media, and any other topic that pertains to the lives and issues of 13 and 14-year-olds. Math, with Big History, the idea of scale. It's really crazy out there. Zooming out to universe-gazing proportions and zooming into the infinitesimal exploration of our own being. This is more of a qualitative exploration than a quantitative exploration that involves math, but I've used this particular idea of scale to associate to so many other things that I'll be talking a little bit more about later in the presentation. Music, the students have been integrating music into their presentations in an effort to evoke emotion in their audience as they develop their ability to communicate effectively. I'd also like to explore more the idea of finding music in nature, which is something that was introduced in one of the books I read by Stephen Howard Booner, which is one of my new favorite authors, along with David Abrams, obviously. But they have a lot in common in some of their key ideas. So the next slide that I'm going to be talking about is cooking tools, innovations, and artificial intelligence. So food systems is definitely something that we spend a lot of time looking at and doing hands-on activities with our cooking and gardening and farming and service learning projects and permaculture. I have the students participate in activities that reveal really surprising facts about our global food system. And it's fun to get them every time where they're like, they think they know all the answers, and then they're shocked to see that they actually were thinking the opposite of what is actually happening on our planet. They also interview older individuals about how they ate and where their food came from, which is an eye-opening experience for them. They complete a food diary, but the food diary is specifically geared towards looking at the proportion of what they're eating in relation to where it is coming from. They analyze food sovereignty and security and what is the implication of cheap food. They examine increased complexity of food systems and how it impacts the fragility of a system. They identify the reasons why food grown closer to home simplifies the system and increases security. And all these ideas very much are kind of more of a scientific look at food systems that I just talked about, but we also try to look at the more intuitive ideas connected to food systems and about the energy that the food brings to their being, that it's not just about fuel that they're putting in their body, it's about the care and the love that human beings have put into growing that food and then harvesting that food and preparing that food, and how that love is actually transferred into their being and is more sustaining for their well-being than food that comes from monoculture or monoagriculture or factory farms, and that the energy of the life of the being that they're eating is important, that buying something cheap is not really something that's worth, it's the life that is being given to sustain your body. Another thing that, and those are the tomatoes, and as we do the entire project with the tomatoes, the students participate in seed saving and planting and growing and maintaining and harvesting and preparing soup with the tomatoes for a soup kitchen. We talk about the energy that they're, as they go along, I bring up like the energy that they're putting into these tomatoes and how it's going to be transferred to the people that are going to get to enjoy them. So one of the other examples or artifacts that I have here are alternatives with big history. Wait, I want to change this into a presentation view. So alternative perspectives, and how big history with heart lends itself to looking at alternative perspectives. One of the books that I use with the students is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and he does a phenomenal job at looking at agriculture in a very different way, and how it actually is one of the history's greatest frauds, is that we believe that agricultural civilizations are an improvement on quality of life, when the way people lived prior to agricultural civilizations was actually a more rewarding way of living. Another debate that we're going to be doing is on artificial intelligence, but this time we're going to be using a format that was used by indigenous peoples. This is just a rough draft of the format. I created it last year, but this year will be the first year that I actually implement it with the students. And then cooking in the soup kitchen, which I've already mentioned. That probably alters their perspective the most, because it's amazing how there's so many people so close to home who don't have enough. It's an eye-opener, and it helps to alter how my students see the world. So ties specifically has quite literally influenced me to expand and improve upon my ability to use technology, because it is an online course, and then also I've had to learn to upload pictures and media, and I've definitely increased my ability to use technology through ties. It's also sparked my intrigue and desire to be more innovative and creative. This is a clay project that we did, and I had to do with my eyes closed, so it was really interesting to try that. And then here's a multimedia video that I had to make and share. and here's another collage activity that we had to do. So it's really interesting. So all three of these creative projects were appropriately challenging and pushed me to go beyond my typical imagination and innovation. It is interesting to get to participate in an educational program that replicates the real learning that we foster here at Ridge Valley. I always wondered, like, if I got to be a student here, how it would have been so wonderful, and now I actually get to see what it's like to participate in an educational program that does what we do with our students. Listen to us, I like class. Okay, and then the third category is makers of meaning, fiction and the power of story. So with metaphor, I decided to put my metaphor in this category. So the reason why I chose to put my metaphor into this particular category is because it really tells a story, and it uses figurative language and creates meaning about how the butterfly connects to me. So the butterfly represents me in my journey through ties in many ways. The very idea that I felt it and had never done so before, under the guidance of my 8-year-old daughter, is an example of how ties has encouraged me to try new things and expand my visions. The colors of the butterfly represent my aura colors, mostly blue, then violet, with touches of green, yellow, and tan. All the colors of the rainbow are present in my aura, but a handful of colors are more dominant. The essence of the rainbow within the felted butterfly represents my allure to rainbows and the song Rainbow Connection. Interconnection and relationship building are represented in the song. I almost chose the rainbow as my metaphor, using the video of my students signing the song from my club as my artifact. The rainbow in my butterfly represents the relationships that I have built and deepened during my journey with ties. I have interacted and shared parts of myself and my life with my classmates and professors that I have not shared with many people. In bearing our soul essence to each other, our colors and light of our beings have brightened and grown stronger. It is these relationships that I value most throughout my experience. The metamorphosis of a butterfly from the liquidation of her caterpillar cell in a cocoon, which represents the transformation I've gone through. I have felt throughout my experience with ties like my mind had been in a permanent state of bloom, open and unassuming, liquefied. The butterfly emerging from the cocoon is the beauty of the world seen through the transparent eyes, or through the butterfly's transparent eyes. Eyes that do not cast judgment, eyes of acceptance. So the first slide that I'm going to talk about is on ties, and specifically how ties has helped me develop my ability with storytelling. There are several life stories that I have never told and certainly never shared through writing. So the idea of like telling stories about my personal life through ties has been very new for me. And I've done it with my children, but telling a real story has a way of almost like lifting off a burden off my shoulders, like putting it out and writing it down was a very positive experience for me. So, story and finding purpose and meaning in life. So story helps, I feel it helps find purpose and meaning in life. We do a lot of big questions, one of them being what does it mean to be human in big history, and purposely choosing stories that pull on heartstrings with the students is something that I attempt to do, connecting through the heart and really trying to get them to feel emotion and compassion and empathy for the different situations or characters in a story. I'm also reminded of David Orr's emphasis on the idea that intellectuals and very educated human beings helped make the Holocaust possible, and how important story is when educating students, that feeling emotions and compassion for others is crucial, and not just giving them the facts. And I'm also reminded of an idea that he spoke of in Earth and Mind, that we won't fight to save that which we do not love. So helping students try to not just develop a relationship with Earth, but helping them and guiding them toward falling in love with the Earth is something that I really try my best to do. So also looking at the power of story and how story is used to really influence the wars that we've had, and how it's used to also control the way people think, and how people actually really give up their life to support somebody's story that they're being told. And so story is very powerful and can really dictate the direction of not just individuals but the world. The idea that everyone needs a story to tell themselves about who they are, and a story to relate to others, humans and other than human worlds. I actually, the title of this slide previously was actually Bioregional Studies, and one of the things that we have the students do with their when they do their mission checklist and they study different organisms is try to find a story or a myth about that organism. And I just feel like when you hear a story about an organism, it really helps to develop that connection on a deeper level. An example of this is when I was reading Stephen Howard Berner's The Secret Teachings of Plants, in The Intelligence of the Heart and the Direct Perception of Nature. He speaks about honeybees and salmon and pigeons, and how each of them have magnetite in their bodies, and how they are actually able to be directed in their migration from the magnetic fields of the earth. And I just found it completely fascinating. And then as I read on, he also expressed that another species that has magnetite in their body is the human, and we have it in our hippocampus. And like I've heard time and time again that we used to be nomadic before agricultural civilizations began, but it didn't really resonate with me until I heard it in the form of a story. So the third slide that I have in this category is expeditions. And the reason why I included this is because it is associated with personal growth, and the idea that so many students come out of the expeditions sharing the impact of the expedition and how much it has changed them, or how much it has influenced the way that they look at things or help them discover who they are. It builds resilience and character. And I had a personal experience with this because my children, 2 of my 4 children, have been on the expedition, and my oldest daughter continually kept saying how much she changed and how much the expedition changed her. And I kept asking, like, how, like, explain, and wanting her to tell me more information. And she wasn't really able to answer right away, but after she thought about it for some time and really contemplated and reflected on it, she concluded that it showed her who she was. That she was struggling at that time with the idea of going to high school and leaving 8th grade. She was kind of going through, she didn't say it in these words, that she was going through an identity crisis, and she was really having a hard time. And it was like she had that expedition, and a calm came over her, and she felt much more confident and a much greater sense of who she was as she was leaving the place she had been going to school for 9 years and going into a much larger, much different environment, high school. So that leads me to my final category, which I am the most intrigued by. And this is the area in which I've probably have gone the deepest in, because it directly relates or associates with autism, which is something that I was really interested in and studying before I even came to Ridge Valley. And I've highlighted a few facts that I read. Once again, Stephen Howard Booner really does a phenomenal job of taking like scientific information and evidence and connecting it to a much deeper intuition, depthful type place. And so in his book he says that up to 25% of the heart cells are actual neural cells. And these neural cells are directly associated with 4 areas of the brain. And these 4 areas of the brain are the control centers of behaviors and proficiencies directly linked to the symptoms of autism. Autism has been described as a cognitive disorder, but I can't help wonder if autism is actually a disorder of the heart. Autism appears as a disconnection from others in the world, and when looking at the span of time that Homo sapiens have lived on Earth as a species, humans have perceived the world with their hearts far longer than their minds. I've looked at the universe story quite many times, and each time it's always like very fascinating to me how our time on Earth in comparison to other species is so small. But then if I look at the entire span on Earth of our species on the Earth, it's actually a very small span of time that we've had language in the grand scheme of things. And language has very much altered the direction of our species to be a much more cognitively perceiving species than one that perceives the world through their hearts. And it's an ability that everyone has. It's in our ancient evolution that we used to travel the earth and really receive information very differently than we do now, because we're such a language-based species. So there was something else I wanted to say. So ties has very much, there's so much, like it was very hard to do this presentation, partially because the amount of information is just unbelievable, and so try to like pick and choose the things that have resonated with me most deeply, or that are like the highlights of my learning. These are probably the areas that have influenced me the most. The idea of hierarchical structures versus hierarchical structures is something I discuss with the students, and I bring up, and I really challenge their way of interacting with each other and their way of kind of seeing their place in their small group social structures and in larger groups. Building relationships that emulate compassion and depth is another area, and intuition in the sense of feeling, not touching or emotion when I say feeling, but like when you walk into the room and kind of asking yourself, how does it feel? Or when you meet someone and the feeling you get when you meet that person, and really paying close attention to your intuitive feelings. And then relational awareness is the 4th area that I'm very much intrigued by. The next slide is sensory gating, which was something that I think that I was very much, I kind of always thought, I have a son who was diagnosed with autism, and I used to always say that it's because he has visual processing disorders and some sensory processing disorders that he was also diagnosed with, and he luckily has grown out of most of all the things that he experienced as a young child, But one of the things I always used to say was that it was like he was receiving too much information and unable to filter or make meaning of the information. So one of the things that Stephen Howard Bruner talks about is how sensory gating is increased with some individuals and decreased with others. And those that have a decreased sensory gating, they're receiving a lot more information and they tend to behave in a much more atypical way. So the population of students that may be labeled special ed, or who may be struggling to not fit in the box that our culture has created for them, and our Western way of thinking, tend to struggle more because they're very different. And it was really interesting to see that prior to the way that humans live on the earth, or if you don't look at the Western culture, you look at other places on the earth, decreased sensory gating is actually something that could help you survive. And maybe it could be a gift, and that way that we live our life in this very mechanistic way, it's challenging for students with decreased, or for individuals with decreased sensory gating, but how could it be perceived more as a gift? And what can we learn from them? There's an overemphasis in our culture with scientifically looking at reading and writing and math and kind of breaking things apart into little pieces and really analyzing very closely. Okay, the second slide, or the third slide. Oh, actually I want to just go back, there was one other thing I wanted to say about this. So, as I mentioned before, my son, Will, had a visual processing disorder, and I remember way back when I watched a simulation, and the simulation tried to show what it was that an individual who has a visual processing disorder is actually seeing. And it was amazing to me how the certain things that he, as a very young child, he was like obsessed with like sneakers. He would like actually lay on the ground when he met somebody for the first time and just stare at their sneakers, or he would like fixate on certain things. And when I watched the simulation and I watched like this overwhelming like intake of all this visual stimulation, and how in a way to kind of like deal with that being overwhelmed, we just like fixate on one like line or something that really stood out, and it was a very interesting thing to see. And I'm also reminded of something that I learned before I came to Virgin Valley about the idea of the canary in the mines, and how one author described individuals with autism and this big increase of individuals with autism being the canary in the mine, and how it's telling us that something's wrong. And maybe it's not that something's wrong with the individuals, maybe it's something that's wrong with the way that our culture is becoming so much more narrow-minded, and so much with this increased sensory gating, and that maybe we need to open up our sensory, decrease our sensory gating and open up our minds more to other ways. And then the third slide is unconditioning. So I titled this one Unconditioning because for me, trying to perceive the world with heart perception rather than cognitive perception is something that I am trying to teach myself and unlearn this whole scientific cognitive way of looking at the world, which is what this whole presentation is pretty much. And I tried to really not really, like this you can't probably see very well, but this mind map here was for my second integrated paper that I had to write. And as I've been trying throughout this, and I've been very challenged throughout this program to really feel my way, to pick what I'm gonna write about and what I'm going to do, and not approach everything in such a scientific linear way. So heart perception, intuition, and sensing our way through the world is something that I am definitely challenged by and trying to do more of for myself. And centuries of an overemphasis on linear learning is challenging to overcome, and reducing linear thinking of the West and think in terms of fractals, webs, and hierarchies. Then the fourth slide here is gifts and the question of how does it feel. So gifts is something I've been really focusing a lot on with the students this year, and not just gifts in terms of yay me, I have these gifts, but gifts in terms of how might that be able to help others. So in associating gifts with challenges. And then I began to wonder, especially when thinking about students who have a decreased sensory gating, who are receiving that intuitive feeling, and who may be more intuitive and perceive things through their heart more than somebody who's got an increased sensory gating. That how does it feel to not be loved and cherished? Or how does it feel not to be likable? Or how does it feel to need to be fixed or remediated, or to not fit into a box that everyone else does? And the reason why I was contemplating this is because my experience of 11 years in the middle school public schools before I came to Ridge Valley as a special educator that worked in general education classrooms, I was confronted often by the general educator being just frustrated and not wanting to deal with the students that I was there to support, and how they really did not like them. They didn't want them in the class. They really wish they would just have resource rooms that they could go in separate classes. They did not want them to be integrated in their class, and there was a lot of pushback big time in the general education classrooms by the general education teachers to not have them in there, and try to make a case as to why they couldn't succeed in their class so that they could get them put out of their class. So when I looked at the sensory gating and the idea that these kids are actually feeling more than what other people are feeling, it made me really wonder about how many children are presenting depression and anxiety in school systems right now. And rather than focusing on deficits, is it possible to spend time exploring gifts and how they might benefit others and the world? So I have a few artifacts to show. This, in our exploration with gifts, we first looked at the gift of humans being able to see the Earth rise or see Earth from space. And this is a mind map that the students generated themselves, that they came up with together as a class at the beginning of the year. This is human gifts from Homo sapiens to the world. And then here's like an individual student's gifts. And then I also had students create symbols to represent themselves so that they could create a class mind map of gifts without feeling like they were being singled out. And then this did grow into also associating with challenges. This is another example that I have. The title of this slide was Big History with Heart and My Independent Study, because this is probably the area where I've created the most different activities that have to do with perspective taking and integrating perspective taking and compassion and empathy into the big history curriculum. Auras is something that we did where the students explored possibly different auras, and there's symbols in this picture that represent gifts. So making associations to exploring your inner self as well as the universe and cosmology. We also did, and I imagine a world where activity that I do with my students as a professional development with our staff, and this is the one that I wrote on that day, so I use this as an artifact. And this is, I was at the school very late one day sneaking it. I came back late at night and took this picture. This is something that I created with Tracy, who's here. It's a perspective taking activity that we did together, and then we also introduced it to the staff here, where we each started to create a picture with a color that we were feeling at that particular moment with a reading and music, and then we had to switch and add to each other's pictures, and then we had to switch back, and then we had to have our pictures flow into each other. So trying to look at somebody else's perspective. And this is a Permaculture Principles, or this is a lesson that I did with students on collaborative communities and looking forward to the future with a hopeful mindset and integrating some of the permaculture principles and the zones. So there's lots of different lessons that I do that I try to pull on heartstrings with the kids that involve human rights and civil rights and the reality of the global food system and bullying and social media and so forth. But this is one that tries to look hopefully at the future that I do with them. And the authors that, not only the ones that we did with ties, but there's many authors that I use throughout the year with the students that really inspire with insightful depth and offer alternative perspectives. Some of them are David Abrams, Robin Wall Kimmerer, Michael Pollan, Yuval Noah Harari, and many more that we read to the students and discuss with the students some of these different ideas that they present in their books. Throughout my ties graduate studies, I've created a huge library of annotations to use as resources when working with students. There's many times where something will come up and I'll just run and grab a book and have to read it to them because it sparks the memory of something I read from a great author. And awareness of the body. Awareness of the body is definitely relates through the idea of scale and going deeper. There's many different activities that I do with the students that to help them gain a greater sense of their being and the sensations that they feel when they're concentrating or feeling attentive and focused or not feeling attentive and focused, and being able to identify what those sensations are and how to influence their ability to increase their focus and concentration and attention. And now I have an activity to do with you to end the presentation. And this is an activity that I pulled from Stephen Howard Booner. So many of the things that I've done with ties, I've very excitedly shared it with everybody already, so I had to find something new and different. So this is one that I have not shared with you yet. So I'm going to read a quote by Luther Burbank. "All life, and particularly all animal life, is sensitive to outside impressions, but the child is far and away the most sensitive organism on the entire planet. The child is like a diamond. I have said more than once, its many facets receive impressions as clear and sharp as etchings."
So this exercise is entitled The Child. So I want you to sit comfortably. Close your eyes and take some deep breaths. Fill up your lungs as if they were balloons. Fill them to bursting. Hold it. Then, when you're ready, slowly release. As you let out the air in your lungs, let any tensions you feel inside you release and flow out with your breath. Do this again. So you're going to begin with your toes, then your ankles, then your knees. As you exhale each breath, let the tension in this part of your body flow out. Do this with every major part of your body as you breathe. Ending with your neck, face, and head. Now imagine the floor or chair under you as two huge cupped hands holding you. Let yourself relax into them. Be held by them. There is no need to hold yourself up. Let yourself be supported. Keep breathing and releasing any tension in your body. Now, see standing in front of you the little child that you once were. What is the impact on you of seeing this part of yourself? Notice everything about your child. How is she dressed? How does her face look? Happy? Sad? Are you happy to see her? Does she seem happy to see you?